Good evening. Good evening. Good evening to our president, Dr. Richard Wesley Clark, and to our moderator, Dr. Jacob Keller, to our political candidates, and especially to incumbent Mayor Harry Rillen, and those who have come to join this forum. We're grateful and thankful for you joining us on today. We do recognize that your time is very valuable, and we will try our best to make sure we expedite our time together and make sure that each one of you have the opportunity to share, and that we will be mindful of your time together. With that being said, we want to introduce our president, Dr. Richard Wesley Clark, and thank each one of you for joining and be a part of this forum. And all after Dr. Richard Clark, we'll have some comments and welcome. Then we will turn it over to our moderator for this evening, Dr. Jacob Kelly. Also, let me remind those who are on just participating and not a part of the debate or the candidate forum, we want to say to you, you can put any requests or question in the chat room. We're subject not to get to them because we do have a list of questions, but we certainly will look at them and see can we entertain them. Again, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Clark, for giving me this opportunity to put this forum together. Thanks.
Thank you, Pastor Roosevelt Ewell. Good evening to everyone. My brothers and sisters, we have assembled this evening via Zoom to hear from our candidates aspiring for political offices in our beloved city, Norwalk. We want to hear from you. We want to know your philosophy, and we want to know what you have to offer to enhance the well-being of Black, brown, yellow, and all people of Norwalk. Help us to make an informed decision in voting on Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. Welcome and God bless.
With that being said, we'd like to now present to you our moderator for today, Dr. Jacob Kelly, who will come and introduce himself, and he will start the forum. Of course, you know that the forum will start off with our mayoral candidates, then go into our coming council and Board of Education candidates, and we'll do it in that order. All right. Thank you, Dr. Kelly.
Thank you, Pastor Ewell and Dr. Clark, our president. God bless all of you tonight. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to get right to it. We are starting with our mayoral candidate forum. We welcome Mayor Rillen and Mr. Riddle. Thank you for being here. And so the guidelines for tonight is our candidates will have 3 minutes for an opening statement. And then we have a series of questions, primarily from the category of economics and equality and education. About 3 or 4 questions for each of those categories. And then we'll give each candidate an opportunity to have closing remarks of 2 minutes each. So we'll get started. With that being said, we would like to offer both Mayor Rillen and Mr. Riddle an opportunity for opening statements. You have 3 minutes. Mayor, we ask that you go first. And good evening.
Well, thank you, Dr. Clark, and much thanks to the Interdenominational Ministers Fellowship for hosting this evening's forum. Certainly wish we could all be together in person, and someday, maybe soon we will. We put this pandemic behind us at some point. However, 20 months later, the COVID-19 still has other plans, and that's where I'd like to begin tonight. We all know there are disparities in our community, and the COVID-19 pandemic shined a bright light on those inequities. As we navigated the pandemic, my administration worked very hard to mitigate the impacts on Norwalk families and businesses through food distribution programs, testing and vaccine sites, small business loans, and community service support. It's critically important that we don't go back to normal after the pandemic ends, but instead we build back Norwalk better. We have a true opportunity to do that, perhaps only once in a generation. So we expect nearly $40 million from the Federal American Rescue Plan Act over the next several years. That's going to help us recover from COVID-19. I've been the mayor for 8 years, and we have engaged with many of you here and those with the MLK Corridor Initiative to hear directly what stakeholders in Norwalk need and want. It's abundantly clear what our needs are and where we need to direct funds. We've identified over 150 projects and initiatives in Norwalk, many in South Norwalk, projects that are truly community-driven with reflective of what residents want to see in their neighborhood. We've already secured $3 million in funding for the MLK Corridor Initiative, and we are leveraging more funds on needed projects. There is a concerted effort underway to direct significant federal, state, and local resources directly into Norwalk and South Norwalk. We plan to use the rescue plan funds on expanded community services for residents, such as providing eviction support, homelessness interventions, behavioral and mental health programs, workforce development and training, and early childhood programs. Our small business community is the backbone of our city. We will use the rescue funds to create small business loans, incubator programs to support the businesses, especially those which are women and minority owned. Education is another priority of my administration, and we will continue to fund the needed improvements and projects for our schools. In my next term, I am committed to building a school in South Norwalk. In fact, we have a meeting with the state of Connecticut next week to propose that school. It's time for the students in South Norwalk to have the full educational experience that they're entitled to. And by not having to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to be transported all the way across town, that will give them that experience. They will have after-school programs that they don't have now.
10 seconds, Mr. Mayor.
Pardon me?
10 seconds.
Okay. We also want to continue expanding housing options in Norwalk with a project that's now underway. A family of 4 in the city of Norwalk will be able to afford a $1,500 a month 3-bedroom apartment. So I want to thank you, and as I remain focused on these critical issues.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Riddle.
Good evening, IMF, and thank you for having me here tonight. I also wish we were in person to meet and greet each other. In 2015, I chose to become a homeowner in South Norwalk on Sheridan Street, down the street from many of your places of worship. Today, I couldn't be happier with that decision, as I have made Norwalk my home now and well into the future. Many changes have taken place over that time, none more than the complete redesign and development of Water Street, the Soundview Landings, and around the Sono train station. I know this largely impacted your communities around your places of worship, uprooting many families and changing established communities, as well as many cultural elements, some for the good and some for the bad. While improving housing opportunities is always a great achievement, completely reshaping communities and cultural elements by overdeveloping can have enormous negative impacts on communities. Suddenly, home doesn't really seem like home anymore. When I'm elected mayor in 2 weeks, my administration's top 3 priorities will be improving our educational standards, a renewed focus on Norwalk's identity and not density, and a complete overhaul of City Hall, restoring transparency, accountability, and efficiency for all Norwalk residents. As I survey the education in our country, especially cities that have spent billions of dollars without any results aimed at improving education outcomes for minority communities, such as New York, Chicago, Baltimore, and et cetera, it is my belief that the last form of systemic racism in our country is our inner city schools. Education is the greatest factor of economic opportunity and success. You can't just throw good money at bad policy and expect outcomes to improve. And as I peel back the layers of our current city government and Board of Education, which spends over $200 million on education, in my opinion, it has done a poor job addressing the needs of our Black and Latino communities and including parents in that process. Regardless of current programs or administrative objectives in place, the numbers speak in greater volumes than the words on paper that are not being implemented or have had little to no effect. And no segment of our community was hit harder by COVID than our Black and Latino students. The lost year of learning has had significant effect, especially in the high needs and special needs segment. We have an obligation as a society to provide a world-class education to all students and prepare each student to achieve success throughout their life. As your mayor, I will work diligently to make that a reality and finally deliver a school to South Norwalk. Norwalk's identity has significantly shifted in the last 8 years. I want to bring a fresh perspective and a renewed focus on what, who, and why Norwalk is the way it is, rather than focusing on cramming as many apartment buildings in an area as much as we can. We need to partner with and understand the communities to ensure what we are building is what is needed and, most importantly, wanted. And finally, in closing, in my opinion, City Hall is a mess, and it is frustratingly difficult process to get anything done. When elected, I will usher in a new era of leadership that brings a new approach and accountability to eliminate stale, ineffective policies. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, both. We're going to start with economics and equality. 2 minutes for a response to each question, please. Mr. Riddle, we'll ask you to go first. At present, Norwalk has 10% workforce housing, 1 unit per 3 to 9 units. We think that percentage should be raised to 15 to 20%. Given the cost of living in Norwalk, what will you do to help raise the workforce housing percentage?
That's a great question, and something that we in the Northeast is very unique here. Our cost of living is so enormously high compared to other parts of the country. It's very difficult to raise a family or pay for your housing. In addition to the workforce development, I think we need a renewed focus on tradecraft and teaching young students how to work with their hands and plumber jobs or welding jobs, which is in high demand across this country. That'll create opportunities for people of all diverse backgrounds in order to make a higher income, as well as get out of the government's stranglehold of the government providing their income. So we need to focus on building new jobs here, as well as bringing in businesses that are going to offer those opportunities, and perhaps put a trade school, a college, or in addition to the Norwalk High School and Breen McMahon High School, a trade craft school with specialized services. I agree that we need to increase the availability of housing since the cost of living, as well as inflation, not to get into too much financial detail with the economy, but inflation is coming, and that's going to increase the cost of goods at the supermarket, at your insurance, at rent. So we need to tackle those headwinds straight away and improve opportunities for people of all diverse backgrounds.
Thank you very much. Mayor Rillen.
You're on mute.
Could you repeat the question, Dr. Kelly?
Sure. At present, Norwalk has 10% workforce housing, 1 unit per 3 to 9 units. We think that percentage should be raised to 15 to 20%. Given the cost of living in Norwalk, what will you do to raise the workforce housing percentage?
Thank you. Well, right now, for the first time in over 30 years, the city of Norwalk is engaging on a complete reworking of our zoning regulations. They need to be more efficient. They need to be friendlier to people across the city. We need to find ways to provide housing for young families so that they can remain here, college students when they leave so that they can come back here. We know that the affordable housing formula for Fairfield County and Norwalk makes it that affordable housing is not truly affordable. So we are, as I mentioned before, there's a project on Wall Street, which unfortunately is being held up through civil litigation, that is going to have over 150 apartments. 100 of them are going to be either 80% area median income, 60% area median income, or 40%. Under 40% area median income, a family of 4 will be able to have a new apartment for a 3-bedroom apartment for $1,500 a month. We also need to have new regulations out in the suburb areas where people can have accessory apartments, in-law apartments, so that young people, again, coming back from college can afford to live here. You look at Soundview Landings as another example. Those are the projects we need to have more of. Soundview Landings has market rate, affordable, and subsidized, all living in the same place. People were saying, oh, nobody's going to take those market rate units. Well, you know what? They were one of the first ones to fill up. And there's only one, last I knew, there was only one unit left. So we have affordable housing, market rate, and subsidized units all living in the same unit. Those are the kinds of projects that succeed. And that helps us build more of those affordable units so we can get over that 10%. And you know, we're doing what we need to do. The surrounding towns are not, and that's unfortunate. But we need to continue doing that. We need to continue building the apartments and making more than 10, 15, 12%. And that's the way to do it, by having those three levels of housing all together.
Thank you. Next question, still talking about economics and equality. Please limit your response to 2 minutes, please. Many minorities say they cannot afford to live in Norwalk. What is your viewpoint for the economic soundness for minorities in Norwalk? Mr. Mayor, you may go first.
The challenges are enormous because there is a systemic racism, and we need to understand and identify where that is. We need to give our young people that world-class education, prepare them for the future, make them feel that when they go into school, they're going to have an equitable chance. We are working on an equity and justice task force for the city of Norwalk. We have our final report is due out this week. Unfortunately, the task force was was delayed a bit because of the pandemic and the fact that the consultant was not able to be here as much as we would have liked. But we need to find where those systemic racisms are and eliminate them. We need to provide that education for our children. We need to give them that feeling that they're going to be able to succeed and compete. We also need to focus on helping minorities and women, Black and brown, open their own businesses. And that's where we come in with small business loans, assistance. I have a new economic and community development director, as well as a business and tourism director. We go out into the public and we meet and we try to get more people to open businesses in town, especially women and minority-owned businesses. And that's where you're going to start to see that success and start seeing people having an equal opportunity. And when we get that Equity and Justice Task Force up and running, I am absolutely certain that they're going to find other areas where we need to improve. And we're going to be reaching out to the community and hearing from the community how we can help you.
Thank you. Mr. Riddle.
Yes, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I believe there's an echo. The cost of living here in the Northeast is very unique to us, and it's very expensive. It is vitally important that we address that cost of living is significantly difficult here, and creating opportunities in education. As well as economic opportunities. It's interesting that the mayor brings up POCO on Wall Street and the development that's going around there and mentions litigation. Unfortunately, there is a Latino baker who has spent over $100,000 investing in his business opportunity. And because of this litigation and a disagreement that they have with Jason Milligan, that baker has not been able to open his bakery. And as such, the Ecuadorian community has suffered because of that. So it really is a problem that we need to address. And education, as I mentioned, is the greatest opportunity of success. So by creating more educational opportunities for our Black and Latino students, as well as them teaching tradecraft and skills, it will enable cost of living to be handled through their own economic development, which we as a government need to support and provide the opportunities to do so. So it starts with the education, and I think that'll grow into a lifelong success. As Jesus once said, give a man a fish, he'll always be hungry. Teach a man to fish, he will never be hungry. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question involves promotion for minority candidates within the city. And we'll start with you, Mr. Riddle. The question is, what will you do to ensure that minorities, especially Black Americans, or hired and promoted in city agencies, including the fire department, the police department, the mayor's office, the library, etc.? 2 minutes, please.
Sure, that is a very good question, and something that we need to incorporate into our city, and not just for the Black community, but also the Latino community. We need to encourage more simulation into city government, operational focuses, as well as opportunities within the government, including those communities, and having a significant program to outreach into those communities is going to be very important in incorporating them. And it is, for a city as diverse as Norwalk, it is very important to include those individuals, because we need a representative government as well as operations into our city. Excuse me, sorry. Into our city, incorporating those people into our city is going to significantly show our communities that we are diverse and we accept that diversity, and it is vitally important that we include those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to dispel the idea that the one single person or an argument is holding up the bakery. One person is holding up the bakery because they're not following the established rules. And that bakery could open up if that one person would spend $2,000, and that's not happening. And that's not the baker, by the way. He's being held hostage. But anyway, my administration is focused on hiring a diverse workforce. In fact, I've hired a chief of community services, the first time that position has been filled in Norwalk in over 20 years. And that is Lamont Daniels, an African-American. I just hired an African-American recreation and parks director coming in from Seattle, Washington. I just hired 12 firefighters. 5 of them are minority. I'm the first mayor that had 4 female firefighters. Our police department is a diverse police department, and they have to be diverse because they're an accredited agency, and we have to have a workforce that represents our community. Let's not forget that our school system is a minority majority school system. And we need to also do a better job of hiring minority teachers so that when our young children go into the classroom, they can see people that look like them, people they can feel comfortable with, that they're not walking into a classroom that looks scary, that looks like it's not welcoming. So there are so many things that we can do. But my administration has made a #1 priority of hiring minority people. I have just hired an Asian IT director. So we have tried everything, and we recruit widely. Under my administration, that good old boy club that used to exist no longer exists.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're going to continue with you while you have the floor. And we would like for you to talk about your position on police reform here in Norwalk.
There are some things that happened across the country that are absolutely horrific. And it's no question about it that there have been abuses by police officers all too often. When you see the excessive use of force resulting in the death of young African Americans, it's absolutely shocking and mind-boggling that something like that could happen in this country, but it does. And so we need to have accountability bills where police officers are held accountable when they violate someone's civil rights. It can be no other excuse. We need to have a strong disciplinary procedure. We need to have a method of determining how we can hire the best police officers, making sure that they are suited for the job. Being a police officer is not an easy job. And believe me, I believe that most police officers are dedicated public servants, and do their job day in and day out, leaving their families and going out and doing their job professionally and respectfully to the public. But there are others that aren't. We need to make sure that they don't serve on the police department, that they're dismissed immediately, that they can't move from one department to another. We need to have a strong police commission in a city that can look at these issues and make objective decisions as to where and how we can discipline officers that stray from the law. There's no two ways about it. Police officers are given the authority to take a life if necessary, but when they abuse that authority, that's when we need to step up, say, that's it, that's enough, we're not going to allow that anymore.
Thank you. Mr. Riddle.
I completely agree with the mayor there. Abuse of power should never be accepted, and the racial disparities in policing need to be addressed. So if there is racism in our police department, which absolutely does exist in this country, we need to find it, root it out, and eliminate it. There's no place for that, especially in a diverse community such as Norwalk. And I won't stand for it as your mayor. I don't accept those policing tactics, nor should it be a part of any police department in this country. We have done a good job of addressing community needs and community outreach, and I have the utmost respect for the Norwalk Police Department. They are very good at what they do. However, there always could be improvements in community outreach and discussions and partnerships. And as your mayor, I will absolutely ensure that those community discussions are being had. We understand the community needs, and we move forward together as a vibrant community that both respects each other as well as works with each other for any horrible things that happen.
Thank you both very much. Final question in the area of economics and equality, and it involves your plans for increased health, noise, and zoning enforcement of current or illegal industries like contractor yards that are still scattered around South Norwalk. What will you do to increase the enforcement of these particular areas? Mr. Riddle, please start.
Yes, it's very good right now. We're going through a complete overhaul of our zoning ordinance and regulations. There seems to be a really big problem in the city about enforcing zoning, enforcing ordinances, and you know, this has been a major problem for the last 8 years, from what I understand. So there needs to be accountability at all levels of government, at all levels of enforcement, and at all levels of adhering to those zoning and regulations. So it starts from the top. It starts with actually doing the hard work, and whether it's a hard truth or you know, it just not being implemented, that happens a lot in this country as well as the city. We need to start enforcing those things and improving our communities, as well as making sure that there is a very significant enforcement and repercussions for not following those zoning laws. Illegalities illegal properties and illegal dwellings should also be addressed and understood. Corrective measures need to be taken, and so that improves all of our lives. The last thing we want is an illegal housing with apartments and contractors all mixed together, and a fire happens and someone can't get out because zoning wasn't followed and regulations weren't followed. So we need to do better as a city there.
Thank you. Mayor Riddle.
I'm not sure what community Mr. Riddle lives in, but in Norwalk, we do enforce our zoning laws and we do our inspections. In fact, we have a blight ordinance, and we have many properties in the city of Norwalk that were served with blight violations. And let's not forget that when they're served, that doesn't mean the violation stops. They have an appeal process, so they have rights. So it's a process that has to be followed from the very beginning to the very end to make sure that people's rights are not violated. We have our fire department that goes out constantly and inspects multifamily homes to make sure, number one, that they're safe, make sure, number two, that they're not being that there's no illegal apartments. When there's an illegal apartment found, two things happen. One, we have to close down the illegal apartment, but we end up having to put the people that are being evicted up at our expense, which is fine, and we can bill the landlord who allowed that to happen. But we constantly do inspections. We have a team of inspectors that go out and look throughout the town. We've served people violations just over off of Perry Avenue recently. We've served at least 4 or 5 businesses for having illegal contractor yards and moved them out of there. And if they don't move out, there's a fine of approximately, I believe it's $150 a day while the violation occurs. So we do our best. It's not easy because, again, you have to find the violation. A lot of times we respond to people's complaints because they see their neighbors doing things that are wrong. Having problems in their yard. They look and they see maybe 10 or 12 cars in a yard where it's a 2-family home, which gives us an idea that there's a violation. People talk to us about contractors' yards. We go out and see if the area is zoned, and if it's not zoned, we serve them with a notice of violation. We are also, as I mentioned before, also we are doing a rewrite of our zoning regulations, industrial zones, and everything, so we can tighten up our zoning and making sure that it's fair and consistent across the city.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're going to move on to the category of education. It's an important category, but given time, we're going to limit the questions to 2 questions in this area. The first question, Mr. Mayor, goes to you. Considering the large achievement gap, what strategies will you propose to ensure that communities of color obtain equitable education? 2 minutes, please.
I'm glad you mentioned that because we're working on that right now with the Board of Education in their equity program. We're making sure that we look at all the programs that are involved in the city, in the school system, working with the Board of Education to make sure that there is no inherent discrimination or inherent biases in the programs, hiring teachers of color, hiring Black and brown teachers, and making sure that we educate them and help them understand the challenges being faced by the minority community in the city so that they can make the young people who are in class feel welcome, help guide them, bring in whatever assistance is needed to give them special attention if they find that they're falling behind, and making sure that we help bring them up and lift them up so that they can succeed. Every young child passing through the city of Norwalk should be able to go to college. The biggest prediction of failure is somebody living in poverty. If you look at grassroots tenets in education, over 4,000 young students, most of them minority, went through that program, but it was an educational program attached to it where they got extra help. Every one of them graduated from high school, and a good percentage of them went on to college. We need more programs like that.
Thank you. Mr. Ritter.
Yes, thank you. This is a great question. As I mentioned in my opening statement, education is the greatest predictor of economic opportunity. And so in our education system here in Norwalk, I think particularly Black boys are overdiagnosed with behavioral ADD or ADHD and learning disabilities in comparison to other students. And if this is happening at our elementary level, it is dooming them for failure. You look at our education graduation rate in the high school level, 63% of our students failed the college curriculum readiness exam. And that is unacceptable. 44% of those students did not go to college. So we need to do a better job within our school system in order to prepare those children for the future, as well as get them to college for greater economic outcomes in education standards. As far as the diversity, I think it's inappropriate to focus on what the classroom looks like. We need to be focusing on how the classroom is failing these students. What is being taught? How is it being taught? We need to understand what the learning disabilities are and the learning limitations are in order to properly address learning issues and to properly bring curriculum that is going to satisfy the needs of our students as well as our diverse community.
Thank you. Same with you, Mr. Riddle. We'll want to know about learning disabilities. What consideration or what is your position regarding learning disabilities when it comes to mainstreaming and special education issues?
This is a great question. As someone who's diagnosed with ADHD and has significantly dealt with issues throughout my life about learning, I know firsthand what these children are facing and what the hurdles are in order to achieve learning. I significantly suffered when I was in school of attention and distractions always kept me from learning. And so I had to work extra hard. And so we need to understand that these students in the special needs and high needs classrooms need extra attention in order to focus them on successes, on being able to learn the material and be successful. We need to understand their disabilities and work with the parents, which I think we've gone away from as a community, including the parents in the process of children's education, which is a significant factor in the success of a child's education. So as a community, we need to come together, include those parents, understand the limitations and the hurdles of someone's disability for learning, and overcome those issues together and have a equitable outcome for all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Again, that is a great question. There is a very robust special education program in the city of Norwalk where young people are evaluated, and together with their parents, they developed an individual educational program for them to help them succeed. We need to hire highly qualified people who specialize in helping special ed young people, people who have those learning disabilities and who have challenges. In what we did in Norwalk, which we did several years ago under my administration in partnership with the Board of Education, we funded a program where a lot of our special education children were being outsourced to other parts, some as far away as Wallingford. We didn't want that to happen anymore because not only was it challenging for them and really disrupted their learning process, but it was critically expensive and it was just out of control. We brought a lot of those young children back into Norwalk rather than outsource them. We saved a lot of money. We gave them better attention. We hired people that were qualified in order to develop those IEPs and make sure that they had the total opportunity to learn, to develop, to grow to their fullest potential. And that has helped out quite a bit. So that's how we help young people with special learning disabilities, hiring qualified, highly trained people who have the special skills needed to teach young people in that category.
Thank you very much. Thank you both very much for those very strong answers. We have closing remarks at this point. And Mr. Mayor, we'll start with you. 1 minute for your closing statement, please.
Well, thank you to the Interdenominational Ministers Fellowship for having us, allowing us to show what we plan on doing. I am very proud of my 8 years in the city of Norwalk and my administration. We have made government more transparent. We have opened up, we have done so much to help people throughout the community with various programs. We've hired a staff that is professional, that helps bring businesses to the city of Norwalk, helps the businesses that are in Norwalk. We've worked very closely with the Board of Education to make sure that we give them the funding that they need in order to do their job. We have increased the Board of Education spending by far more than any previous administration, and the results are showing. The City of Norwalk school system was the highest achievement index in the city, in the state of Connecticut, and the #1 progressive urban school district. So we're very proud of what we've done. I want to continue. I thank the City of Norwalk. I don't feel I'm entitled to this vote. I feel I have to earn the vote of the public every single day when I'm out there in the community doing the things that we need to do to make Norwalk better.
Thank you very much. Mr. Riddle.
Yes, thank you very much, IMF, with your time today. The last 2 years has been very difficult for our communities, businesses, and has put a strain on our education system. We all felt deeply the negative impact of COVID-19 and the political decisions made in response. The challenges our community faces today, I believe, are the direct result of past failures and a flawed vision for Norwalk. Harry Rilling is focused on partnering with developers to increase our density to solve Norwalk's problems, further eroding Norwalk's identity. I think Norwalk has had enough. And contrary to what the current mayor says, our education system is not as strong as he thinks it is. We need to significantly improve that if we want our community to be successful, as well as bring our next generation leaders to the future prepared. Norwalk is a very beautiful place with amazing potential, and we need that renewed focus on identity, not its density. I'm running for mayor because Norwalk's future depends on fresh ideas to grow economic development, improve our schools, and deliver a school to South Norwalk while thoughtfully redeveloping our city to meet the needs of today and tomorrow. Local elections are the most important elections. They have the greatest effect on your quality of life. This one may be the most important of our lifetime. Norwalk and I need you to get out and vote Road B on November 2nd for a better path forward. I thank you, and I look forward to your vote on November 2nd.
Thank you both very much for your time tonight. We're going to transition now. Pastor Ewell, did you want to give us some transitional guidance, or do you want to just move straight?
Yes, Dr. Kelly, just a quick brief. I have checked the attendance of the Common Council. It should be all in attendance. I have accounted for everyone that is listed on our program, and we'd like to thank the Common Council member for showing up tonight and being prepared to share with us on tonight. And with that being said, moderator, Dr. Kelly, I put it back in your hand, and thank you again.
All right, thank you very much, Pastor Ewell. Again, to Dr. Clark, our president, to each one of you that's here tonight, thank you so much for taking time to be with us. We're going to get right to it. Each candidate for the Common Council will have 1 minute to make your opening statement, and then we will ask a series of questions, primarily from 2 categories, economics and education. And we will ask you to limit your response to those questions to 1 minute each, please. So without further ado, we're going to start. And I'm just going to go down the list as I have it. And again, please limit your remarks, your opening statement to 1 minute. Ms. Lisa Brenton.
Yeah, okay.
I just had to unmute myself. Thank you. I want to thank the IMF for hosting this event tonight. I'm an independent. I voted nationally for Obama, but in the past 2 elections, I voted third party. Why? Republicans to right and Democrats to left. At state and local levels, I vote for moderate Dems and Republicans. I like the middle. I brought the independent line back to Norwalk because it needs a middle. It needs representatives more loyal to people than party, because we need transparency. We talk a lot about diversity, equity, and affordability. Norwalk is diverse in terms of race, sexual orientation, and socioeconomics, certainly more than neighboring towns. But does Norwalk welcome diverse ideas when 24 out of 25 offices are held by one party? Is it equitable to give tax credits to rich developers for luxury apartments? How about when the state gives a Hartford student $10,000 and a Norwalk one only $900? Or when a South Norwalk elementary gets shelved, replaced by a regional high school? How affordable is Norwalk when city employees earn double or triple the median local income of residents? Facts matter, and that's what I want to talk about tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Smith.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly, and thank you to the IMF for the opportunity to address you and your parishioners tonight. I'm a mom of 3 Norwalk Public School graduates, a grandma, resident and taxpayer for more than 22 years here in Norwalk, and I'm really proud to have served our children and families as a teacher in our public schools. I believe that gives me a unique perspective on our public education. I'm a committed public servant with no agenda other than to serve my community with honesty and integrity. I currently serve on the Common Council committees of Planning, Public Works, Land Use, and Building Management, but I'm most proud of chairing the Community Services Committee and the ability to work closely with Lamont Daniels to improve the quality of life for our residents in need and to work toward an equitable and just city. I'm an advocate for a financially healthy city that offers top quality schools, fair taxes, responsible development and redevelopment, where the voices of all stakeholders are heard, affordable housing, inclusive zoning, a great park system where our children can play, good services for our elderly and disadvantaged, and a sustainable city prepared for the effects of climate change. I hope I can count on your vote and your support tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greg Burnett.
Thank you to the IMF Coalition and Reverend Ewell for coordinating tonight's forum. The key issues that define my campaign platform and those of my colleagues include the following: accessible and affordable housing options. One should be able to work in Norwalk and also afford to live in Norwalk. Basic housing is essential to every person or family's well-being. An equitable educational curriculum to ensure all students are future ready. Sound fiscal management and responsible stewardship of Norwalk taxpayer dollars to minimize or reduce tax increases. The physical infrastructure and mobility enhancements to allow shared space for drivers, bicyclists, and pedestrians. And to continue to advocate for safer neighborhoods by providing our police and fire departments with the tools necessary and resources to continue to be proactive in serving our community. Basically, to summarize, I stand for a more resilient Norwalk for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dominique Johnson. Dominique.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kelly. I had a bit of a delay there. Thank you, Reverend Ewell and the Interdenominational Ministers Fellowship for this opportunity to speak with you tonight. When I joined the council in January 2020 as an at-large member, I took that very seriously. I went to every district, I talked to folks in every neighborhood, and I continued to build those relationships across communities. And for me, why I'm running again is for our present, but especially for our future, the next generation. And what we do now, as we all know, is going to affect greatly their quality of life, their ability to live with safety, support, and the opportunities that they deserve. So what that means for me is that every day I work in collaboration very hard for the people of Norwalk with my colleagues and others so that we have a more equitable, livable, and sustainable city. But the reason the word equitable is at the front there for me is it runs through everything I do. I come from a background as an educator and in the nonprofit world. And so for me, equity is the strand livable and sustainable. I mean, what we need to do is support our families. We need to promote 21st century job creation. And we also need to really work to lay a groundwork now so that we can fight for a more proactive approach to climate change in our city that's really based in equity. We have to center the communities and the areas of our city that are already being greatly affected. And this almost always corresponds with particularly Black and Latino communities in our city and those of low incomes. So I hope that you join in with this coalition to build the future of Norwalk together with this eye toward our future. For those in your congregations, I'm so honored to have this opportunity to speak with you and to continue this work that we do together, knowing that you lead the way and I'm here to serve you. So I look forward to talking with you more about what we can offer together to this city and for your vote on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh Goldstein.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kelly, and to the IMF and to all the parishioners and people listening tonight. As the youngest candidate running citywide, I believe strongly that Norwalk's Common Council should reflect its people, diverse in all respects, united with a common desire to improve the city we are so proud to call home. Since 2019, I've served on the Zoning Commission, where I have strongly and greatly supported the expansion of affordable housing by expanding workforce housing requirements across the city, and an expansion of Colonial Village. But I would be the first to admit, and I've learned firsthand, that there is so much more we need to do to make sure that Norwalk is livable, sustainable, and equitable for all of its citizens. I believe that there is a lot of work that is afoot and a lot of work we can do to further and accomplish these hard and difficult goals, but important and just goals. I also believe that we should be working to make sure that Norwalk doesn't just have the best city school district in the state of Connecticut, but just the best school district in the state of Connecticut. I am so excited to be working with a team that believes in making sure that we have a livable, sustainable, and equitable Norwalk, and making sure that we work together to fight all problems that affect all Norwalkers, from climate change to justice and equity. I am so grateful for your invitation tonight and look forward to answering all of your questions.
Thank you so much. Nora, I do not want to mess up your last name, so please forgive me.
No worries. I tell people all the time, you can just call me Nora, but I am Nora Najelski-Eichner, for anyone who's curious what you should do with that DZ there. And I really thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I'm running really with a focus on Norwalk's future. And for me, that in particular means our children and the need to make sure that all of our children receive a world-class education, and our climate and sustainability future. We are going to be hit hard by extreme weather in the city. We know it's coming. We've already experienced it. And both of those issues have tremendous racial justice and economic justice components. And so it is key that as we prepare for the future that is coming for Norwalk, we are focused on making sure that all of our citizens are included, that all of their needs are being met, that we're making sure that we're taking into account the perspectives of parents of color and communities of color on what's happening in our schools, and the value of having a common council that works collaboratively with a school board that is really focused on achievement for our students. And then equally so, we need to make sure that we are planning for the long term in terms of climate change. We have to invest now in flood protection, particularly for communities in South Norwalk and East Norwalk that will be hit hard by sea level rise. And again, that is, I think, a key component of making sure that we are helping low-income families protect their homes and be ready for the future that's coming.
Thank you. Richard Bonifant.
Thank you, IMF and Dr. Kelly. I went by the guidelines that said, put up you got a minute for your issues. So I'm going to go by that one. So I think the issues are overdevelopment, traffic congestion, poor infrastructure planning for the pressures that come with all the apartments. For instance, on site, there's no place to walk your dog, so everybody's looking for the nearest park or somebody else's lawn. Will there be enough water to carry if we keep building and building? Will the sewage treatment plant and will we have enough water to take care of that? And the parking requirements seem to be getting relaxed. So there'll be cars parked all around neighborhoods. I'd like to see in-person meetings again, because quite frankly, the current council doesn't have to look the public in the eye, and the public has no idea where they stand in line if they want to wait their turn to speak at a hearing or at a meeting. So I'd like to see us go back to in-person meetings so that there'll be a little more engagement and the council has to look the people in the eye themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Matthew Maluzzi.
Hey guys, thanks for putting this together. This is my first time running in politics. I've never done it before. And my issues in Norwalk are pretty simple. I think I'd like to bring like fresher, greener thinking to the Common Council and just smarter construction. What do I mean by smarter construction? I think we all know kind of what that means. I think, I think we have to all have the conversation with ourselves. What kind of city or town do we want to have? Norwalk is kind of becoming a city rather rapidly. and that's forcing a lot of change and displacing people, and it's kind of changing the character of the town, and that's one of my main issues. I think when you talk to people, I grew up in Darien. Please don't hold that against me. But in Norwalk was always the big town, and Stanford was the city, and now we're increasingly becoming, more of a city. And I think there's a lot of resentment over all the over construction and building, and like everybody's talking about, it doesn't seem to be lowering housing prices. So my issues are very simple: help the environment on a practical, local way, and bring more transparency and intelligence to the zoning and construction process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we heard from everyone, did we not? Did we miss anyone? All right, awesome. So we're going to get right to a couple of the issue questions that IMF has. And once again, I would please ask you to limit your response to 1 minute. I know that's extremely difficult, but in the respect of time, please do the very best you can to limit your response to 1 minute. We're going to start with the question on economics and equality. And the question is, what is your viewpoint for the economic soundness for minorities in Norwalk? What is your viewpoint for the economic soundness for minorities in Norwalk? We'll start with Dominique Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. During the pandemic, most of our term was during the pandemic, it really became clear that business owners and small business owners in particular who were of color and were women-owned businesses experienced such disproportionate effects from not being able to access the PPP loans. So the business outlook that I see could be better, but I think that what's promising is all of this American Rescue Plan funding coming into the city and the ability to make very strategic decisions about how we use these resources for our community. That's why I support this really big push to make sure that this money goes to minority and women-owned businesses, startups, incubation hubs, so that particularly our young people and our young entrepreneurs of color can have a chance to get their business off the ground so they can provide for their families in a meaningful way, so they can either remain in Norwalk or make more of a life for themselves as they continue to age in Norwalk. I'm really happy that we have some wonderful businesses that have gotten very entrepreneurial, and I think that spirit is really potentially very uniquely Norwalk, and I'd love to see us really pursue more support for those young entrepreneurs in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Thank you. The question about what, say that question again.
Sure. What is your viewpoint for the economic soundness for minorities in Norwalk?
Okay. Well, if you were talking about businesses or families trying to struggle to survive, whether it be, I think everybody gets a fair shot. And if you don't know what you're doing, then we need to provide the help to show you how to do these things, whether it be applying for a loan for your business, whether you're a minority or a white person or whatever you are, that doesn't matter to me. It should be like fair to everybody and everybody plays on the same field. And if somebody feels left out, then we got to provide them with the help and the guidance from mentors in education and business. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara?
Yes, thank you. Economic soundness for our minorities in Norwalk. I mean, I do agree with what Ms. Johnson just said, that the pandemic had a devastating effect on people of color and people who are of lower socioeconomic. I mean, it affected all of us deeply, but I think that, some of the things that we need to focus on moving forward is to continue supporting those minority-owned and women-owned businesses, providing rental assistance. And I think one of the things we really have to continue our focus on is quality education for our children, so that as they grow and become productive members of society, they will stay here in Norwalk, they will contribute to the economy here in Norwalk, and they will be, living successful lives. But we also one other thing I think that by assuring funding for our nonprofits to uplift all of our people and improve the quality of life for all Norwalkers.
Thank you so much. Jonathan. Is Jonathan Riddle with us?
Oh no, I was the mayoral candidate.
Yeah. Right. My mistake. Sorry, so sorry. Greg.
Great. Oh, thank you. I was just unmuting here. Sure. Well, economic soundness to me translates to opportunities. And in order to provide opportunities, we have to remove the systematic barriers that prevent those opportunities. Things that we can do to give opportunities to qualified and available candidates, creating job creation, job opportunities, job preparation, workforce training. We have to ensure that the minority candidates are of an equal capability, and we can only do that by providing them with the opportunity to learn and be prepared to be strong candidates for those job opportunities that come about. Again, removing the systematic barriers that exist. It's been mentioned about business development and opportunities. We have to give our small businesses, minority businesses, an opportunity. And then finally, I'd like to close with home ownership. What better way to build an economic soundness than to have equity, to be able to invest and grow equity so that you can progress in this very competitive environment. So those are the things I would like to highlight.
Thank you so much. Nora?
I'll join a lot of my colleagues in a number of the issues that they've raised. Particularly, I agree very much with Greg that we need to think about building equity through homeownership or through investment in small businesses that can return equity over the long term. But I also want to highlight the importance of childcare and beginning the conversation about universal pre-K, which is a long-term conversation, but it needs to start because it's very hard for women to be in the workforce while they're absorbing enormous childcare costs. We also need to maintain a focus on helping our existing small businesses. We need to reward those contractors who maintain clean yards while we're enforcing those who don't. We need to find opportunities for all of our truly fantastic trade-based and construction-based small businesses to flourish here in Norwalk and not be driven out by the high cost of storage. And we need to make sure that we are investing in our education for our children to have options across the spectrum. There are great careers, college-oriented and not. We also need to make sure that we are giving them the entrepreneurship training they need to choose their future for themselves, whatever those sort of economics that they want to invest in. It's about opportunity.
Thank you. Matt?
One of the stories I've heard over town this relates to zoning and construction is the small businesses that we currently have. A lot of the small businesses we currently have, I've heard a couple stories. I talked to a guy who owns, I think, the Universal Barber Shop on Wall Street. And he told me a kind of story about him kind of seemed like he was getting pushed out of his barber shop. I talked to a baker. I think, and it comes down to all this construction. It seems like we're kind of steamrolling small businesses for the sake of some of these apartment buildings, stuff like that. And I think there needs to be a huge rethink on that. We talk about equity and ownership in the community. I think we need people to plant roots here. I hate to say it's like when you look at the demographic data, the African American community actually shrunk over the past 10 years. I don't know why. The town's become more diverse. But are people leaving the town because they don't feel welcome or the housing's going up? I don't know what those issues are. All I know is that it's my first time getting involved, and I'm willing to work with all people to make a difference. Thanks.
Thank you. Lisa.
Thank you. it can't be good for the minority community here in Norwalk. It's not good for anybody right now. COVID has been hard on everyone. You've got a lot of Westchester and New York City pushing up into Connecticut. Median property taxes in Westchester are $17,000. In Fairfield County, they're $10,000. We look cheap to the New Yorkers. So it's making everything more expensive. So housing is the most expensive component here in Lower Fairfield County. And unfortunately, our biggest employer is local government. So that means it's minimum wage jobs for many people living here. So you've got the African-American community being pushed up to Bridgeport and then commuting back down here for minimum wage jobs. And you've got a lot of the middle-class white community moving south because they can't afford their homes. We need the state to step up. I mean, local government doesn't create jobs. If it can help with the grants and small business and be easier in terms of doing permitting and making it easier to open up a business. We heard earlier about the baker who's having a bit of problems in Wall Street. But at the end of the day, the state has to step up and make us a more attractive place to do business for everybody, and then that will spill over. And so, in the case of the city of Norwalk, we simply we're kind of a victim of what's going on in the state, and we're a victim of the marketplace. But this is being driven by Hartford. Hartford wants more sales tax and income tax. More bodies equals more money to Hartford. But how we run our city, how we pave our roads, how we provide housing, that's not really their concern. That becomes Norwalk's concern. And so that's why I'm concerned about the density going on in a Hartford agenda that I don't think necessarily serves Norwalk or Norwalkers very well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think did we get everyone?
No,
Josh, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No worries, Dr. Kelly. We've heard a lot of interesting ideas, and I absolutely support all of what my colleagues on the Democratic ticket said, and they've made a lot of good points. But one thing I want to highlight, and it's something that Greg said, which is that it's about removing or reducing barriers to have opportunity. And Lisa talked a moment ago about housing, but I think her diagnosis of the problem is incorrect. The actual real issue when it comes to housing in Norwalk is not that there's too much housing, but actually that there's not enough. There's a housing shortage in Norwalk, which means that the actual price of rental units and homes is inflating, and it is driving the market up at an unreasonable rate. So believe it or not, we actually need to create more opportunities for people to live in Norwalk at an affordable rate. I mean, and I know the mayor talked about this earlier tonight, but the new Wall Street project is an example of this, where there are homes available for families where the median income is lower than the state median income at 60%, which is around $80,000, which doesn't hit a lot of the people who need affordable housing. So, it's not, there are many issues that have been talked about tonight, but when we talk about the biggest barriers to opportunity is making sure that rent and housing costs are on the lower, closer to about a third instead of about a half. If we can do something to make sure that we can create more affordable housing and be able to make sure that Norwalkers have more of a chance to afford to live in Norwalk, they will stay in here, because unlike what others have said, Norwalk is an attractive place for business, and that's been proven by the fact that our grand list has grown exponentially over the last years. We just have to make sure that money makes it to all Norwalkers of all socioeconomic backgrounds.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your answers. Let's move on to police reform. What is your position on police reform in Norwalk? Richard, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you. I happen to know many of the Norwalk policemen. I've helped them out with different projects along the way, and I'm kind of proud of our department. Okay, you're going to see a few things here and there in the news, and I'm pretty sure that between the community and the police commission and the unions and the membership themselves, they have no tolerance for bad apples either. So if I'm not sure what kind of reforms we're looking at, but I am not in favor of a civilian review board or anything like that. If they need to expand the police commission by a couple of members, that's something to explore. But I have full faith in our police department in Norwalk, Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh.
Sorry there, I had a little mute difficulty for a second. I want to focus on two things in the 1 minute answer here. The first is charter reform. I think that there has been a movement, and I support this movement, to support charter reform, to talk about reforming the police commission, making it a little bigger, and certainly making it a more diverse and representative body that can do a better job of overseeing police and police administration. The second thing I want to talk about is another sort of affordability issue, which is I was at the National Night Out, and I remember speaking with an officer, and we talked, and I was in a conversation, and what came up was, how many officers actually live in Norwalk? And the answer is 30%. We will have a police force that's more representative of Norwalk and has more of an investment in the community if more people can afford to live in Norwalk and be a part of the community. These affordability issues are not just about your pocket, but about how we treat the community and how we are invested in the community if the police ourselves live in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt?
I think it's simple. I think, there are a lot of good cops and there are bad cops. And if cops step out of line, they should be treated like anybody else. Now, I mean, I'm white. I grew up in Darien. I've been pulled over and had cops that had an attitude. I mean, it's, I had a friend actually that got pulled over by the Norwalk police and it didn't go well for him. And I think the cops were out of line and they kind of protected him. I think there's some reform there that is necessary, but I think it's very simple. Like if people step out of line, you don't protect them. So I don't know what the entire story is there, but cops are not above the law like anybody else. So end of story. Like if people step out of line, but at the same time, cops have a pretty thankless job right now. And the past year has been, I wouldn't have wanted to be a cop the past year, to be honest. And to some extent, communities suffer because of that stigma. But look, it's a complicated problem. I think it's just proper enforcement. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yes, before I talk about the police, I want to just have a chance to rebut some comments that Josh made since he went after me. Norwalk's got 14% affordable housing, so more than the state requirement, and that's not to even account for the illegal or the multi-unit family houses that we haven't really been able to keep track of. Do we need more? Yes, we all need more affordable housing. But the point I need to make is that Norwalk is also the most densely populated city. We're more densely populated than Stamford. We're more densely populated than Danbury. We are a very limited space. We bump up against Wilton. We bump up against New Canaan. So in terms of creating more and more housing, we are getting very, very densely populated. So the state needs to put a little bit more pressure on our neighbors. There's got to be more than hate has no home here in our neighboring communities that have 2 or 3% affordable housing. So that's the only thing I want to say there. With regard to our police force, we can always do better. I think Norwalk's in better shape than most, but I agree with Josh. I think the fact that we don't have enough of our police force living in the community and as part of the community is part of the problem. They don't live here either. And so I think that as a 61-year-old white woman, I cannot even begin to experience what the African-American community has gone through over the years. I do like to think that Norwalk is in better condition than that. We have always been historically a diverse community, but we can always do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Lisa there. I do think that Norwalk's police department is significantly better than so many that we have heard about across the country over these past couple of years. And I do think that Chief Kohalwick is particularly responsive to the concerns of the community. Some of the things that the police force is focusing on, and which I very much support in terms of reform, is de-escalation training. The de-escalation training has been beefed up. Another thing that the police department has done is to hire a social worker to reach out to help with the officers when they have to respond to, say, for a domestic call, for example, where it doesn't need to turn into something more serious. So I also think that I agree with the comments about, officers not being able to afford to live in Norwalk, because when those officers are out there in the community and talking to the community and invested in the community, they're going to create relationships that that improve the any outcomes for our community and relationships with the police department. And finally, I just want to point out that, I very much supported the Equity and Justice for All Commission. I know the mayor had mentioned that we are expecting a report from them almost momentarily in terms of where we're moving, but I'm looking forward to the guidelines from that combined with the Blue Ribbon Commission, focusing more on our police department and how we can improve, because we can always improve.
Thank you. Greg?
Thank you for this question. In my opinion, when I think about police reform, one of the first things I think about is making the job as a police officer manageable. And how can we do that? We can do that through additional funding. Some people will say defund the police. And I believe in reallocating the funds within the police force and using those funds to enhance their job that they do on a daily basis. And Barbara just mentioned one of those initiatives, which is providing funding for mental health professionals or social workers that can work with the police on various cases that may not tie them up, and they can focus more on community engagement and community policing, and those issues that might result in having a mental health professional address specific situations can take the caseload away from the officers. I also believe that the police force should be representative of the communities that they serve. And we have done a great job in recruiting and ensuring that we can identify police officers that reflect the communities which they serve and have a better understanding of the individuals that live in those cities. So we are on the right track. I'm supportive of the work that has been done and will be done going forward with various initiatives for our police force. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Nora?
I join a lot of what my colleagues have already said. I am a huge fan of community-oriented policing. I think it's the right approach. I think that we need to think about our emergency response system as an emergency response, meaning that different kinds of responders might be necessary for different situations, with a particular emphasis on mental health and social work services, potentially being the correct first-line response. I think that it is crucial that our police officers who are dedicated public servants be overseen by civilians that reflect the community that they police. So I'm very much supportive of community voice being a key part of how we operate our police department. And I also do agree that it is crucial that our police officers be from our community, represent our community, and look like our community. And I think that's an investment we need to continue to make in figuring out how we can create middle income housing that really does allow all of our public servants, teachers, firefighters, everyone who works with us in the community to be part of our community at all times.
Thank you so much. And Dominique.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Back in summer 2020, we saw how much of an issue this community police relationship was. So it was so important to our community members, and they got to the streets and they made sure that their voices were heard. And as public servants, it was up to us to make sure that we took their voices and their concerns into the city and into the city hall as well, and really listen. So ever since particularly those moments, I've been very much in contact with community activists and advocates to make sure that I sensed what they wanted. And it was very clear to me that they very much wanted to have a conversation about a possibility for charter revisions so we could make the police commission, as some of my colleagues have said, more representative of the people of the city, bigger, from people with more diverse backgrounds. There's even some who really do want a civilian review board aspect of that. So I agree with my colleague Nora about that being something we should really be open to and think about. And also, when I think about the work the Community Policing Division of Norwalk PD does, that to me just makes the case for having our police officers as residents and community members. Those relationships, we see the impact that they have in the quality of the community-police relationship. And lastly, I do want to say that when it comes to policing, it's a particular, I'm very happy to say that it's been a particular, I think, improvement on our Health and Public and Safety Committee on the council that I proposed a opportunity for the public to hear in a public forum from our public safety departments. And so I'm really happy that we've been doing that now for about a year, where in public, in the open, Norwalk PD's chief or deputy chief will be there every month to answer any questions we get from residents and from us as representatives of those constituents. And it's just the beginning. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for those answers. We're going to move on to the area of education with just a couple questions in that area. And the first question is, considering the large achievement gap, what strategies would you propose to assure that communities of color obtain equitable education? What strategies will you propose to assure that communities of color obtain equitable education? Again, please keep your responses to 1 minute. And Matthew, we'll start with you.
I think education is the backbone. I was involved in a charity in Africa for a bit, and I kind of became unenthusiastic about it after visiting there, because Africa's different. You can have a bad government that takes it out. In America, some kids from South Norwalk, if he gets the right education, can rise to the very top of society here. There's a huge multiplier effect in getting a kid a good education. Now, I don't know what those issues are. As I said, I'm new to politics. I know that there's some things the Republicans suggest that are probably good, and there's some things that the Democrats suggest that are probably good for education. But I do think we can always make education better, and that is really, a good education is a backbone, and that's the foundation under which you build, citizens that rise and become, stewards of the local community and pillars, and that's very important. So I'm willing to work with all people involved to make education better. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Nora?
Thank you. So I will mention three things. Key to say that the Common Council's job really is to work collaboratively with the school board. Our state laws empower the school boards to make the curriculum decisions, and I don't think we should step into that lane. But I see three key places where the Common Council really needs to work. One being the Sono School, which has to happen and needs to happen as soon as we can make it happen. The second is, again, a long-term plan to reach universal pre-kindergarten. And the third is to make sure that we really are investing in challenging hands-on curriculum, giving students the kinds of things that inspire them, make them want to stay in school. And that's, again, a way of collaborating with the school board to make our education truly world-class. What you get in a world-class education is the opportunity to explore, to think creatively, to be challenged, to be intellectually respected. And that's what we need for our students.
Thank you, Nora. Greg?
Thank you for that question. The first thing that I think about when someone says the word achievement gap is to ask the question, why does an achievement gap exist? If you take a child of color and a child not of color in their early development stages, what causes that gap to exist? And that's one of the questions that I constantly asked when I served on the Board of Education for 4 years. Why do we have an achievement gap? Are we teaching our Black and brown students differently from our white students? I don't think so. But we have to provide the support systems for our students in terms of several areas. One, starting with parental support. I think having parents involved in their student education to provide them assistance beyond the student day is very important. So how can we provide resources to parents so they understand and can assist their students in their learning development? Two, after school programs are very important. Again, extending the student day that goes beyond what they learn in the classroom into an environment where they can further learn and encapsulate the information that they learn each and every day. And finally, providing a welcoming environment, a learning environment. And that starts with having teachers that they can look at as role models, teachers that might look like them, that they feel comfortable with in terms of learning. Those are three things that we have to really focus on if we truly want to close this gap.
Thank you, Greg. Josh?
I could not agree more with what everything Greg just said. And obviously my colleagues as well, but definitely what Greg said fits perfectly within what Nora said, which is that obviously we want to respect educators and make sure that the professionals are the ones who are making decisions. We have educators on our Common Council slate here. I'm so proud to be running with qualified and wonderful educators. And they'd be the first to say that making sure that support exists for parents and community members, making sure that the overall percentage of funding for the schools out of our budget actually increases over time. That's something we can do. The other thing I would say is making sure, that I think here I live in South Norwalk. The fact that there is a District 99 is a problem that should be fixed. And obviously I think there's almost universal acknowledgement that there should be a South Norwalk community school. But if you want to talk about gaps in education, especially for African-American and Hispanic children, it's the fact that they're being bused all over the city and not having access to programs that are near them. I also think that making sure that we expand programs for universal pre-K and making sure that we work with our state and federal partners to be able to get as much assistance as we can to expand our educational and educational support programs.
Thank you, Josh. Dominique?
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Supporting our children is the greatest investment we could ever make in anything. I could give you an answer that's going to be 5 times as long as what I have, because in my beginning of my career, for the I spent it getting a PhD in urban education policy. And in fact, from the same program that Dr. Edward First now teaches in, this is my heart's work. And this is something that's been on my mind for decades. Things I think we need to do and really work with our partners on the Board of Ed is to make sure they know they're supported in the fact that we need to hire more teachers of color in our district, especially those from Norwalk. And I've talked with Board of Ed members about potentially having a pipeline program for graduates of our public schools to go on to earn teaching credentials so they can stay in Norwalk, come back to Norwalk and teach. I also think neighborhood schools are some of our most important community-based organizations. They're our hub, they're the heart of our neighborhoods, and they really do teach the whole child. So we need to make sure we support families with not just food, but also, all the basic necessities that schools now in many ways provide our families. And lastly, having access to magnets and IB programs and all those honors programs need to be equitable. So we need to make sure that it's not just a matter of social capital, but that you, any child in Norwalk, know the pathway to that success for you. Thank you very much. I think one more thing I want to say too is that this has to start before kindergarten. We have to start with early childhood, like my colleagues have said. This has to start with childcare. And that could really make all the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique. Lisa?
Thank you. I agree with everything that my colleagues have said. Support systems, after-school programming. I worked in the Housing Authority and taught after-school programs for 7-8 years, extending the school day. All these things will help close the achievement gap. But all of these things cost money. And one of the things that single party rule has done in the state of Connecticut and in Norwalk is that we've swept under the carpet the fact that we've been more loyal to our party than we have to students. The educational cost sharing formula, which we have not made very much noise on, despite the fact that we've got an increasing, our free and reduced lunch student population has grown. Just to give you an indication, when my children were in the school system in 04-05, and when they started, we were 20%, 23% free and reduced lunch. We're now over 60%. We're not getting really any more money in terms of educational cost funding. To give you, I quoted some numbers. Hartford got, it gets over $200 million. We get 11, okay? Hartford has a 79% free and reduced lunch. We have 61%. Again, that equates to $10,000 a student to Norwalk's $900. And so if we're going to close the achievement gap, we have got to address the fact that we have got a higher need student population and that we need more assistance from the state. And this is where I argue that Norwalk, if you had a little bit more check and balance and some various parties or perhaps Democrats that were courageous enough to speak out, we are being exploited and it's costing our children dearly. And it's costing Black children dearly. And so until we talk about the funding issues, in honesty, we're not going to be able to fix anything because it does cost more money to service higher need children. And that's where we're at.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Richard?
Thank you. And in a rare moment here, there's a lot of us that agree on so many of these exact same points. South Norwalk does need a school. Right now, if they get on a bus, they spend an hour and 15 minutes going to a school that's far away from where they live. They can't get involved in after-school programs. They have to get on the bus and go back home, or else they're not going to get a ride. So they can't be involved in any clubs or participate in any activities afterwards. Plus, the other downside to that is the parents can't make it to the school if they don't have good transportation to go to a night meeting or something like that. If their kid is in another part of town and they don't have any way to get there, then the parents don't have like that much engagement into the education of it. It sounds strange, but you can't teach somebody who doesn't want to learn. And I know that sounds weird, but the whole trick is to inspire them, all right? That's what they need, an inspiration. They need teachers that want to make them learn, make them curious, make them feel them that, let them feel that they got rewarded when they did something right. Pick their imagination, all right? Anyway, and strengthen the families. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And Barbara.
Thank you. I'm going to offer a somewhat different perspective, having taught in our schools for 12 years. I think one of the most important things that we can do is look at test reform. If we're talking about the achievement gap, what we're talking about are test scores. And we know that the more homogeneous, affluent, predominantly white districts test higher than our kids. And that's because, you know, we have a very diverse population of children who come from all over, speak many different languages, and all have extraordinary gifts individually. And so, you know, I would also like to point out that, you know, you hear so much, oh, our schools are, you know, are bad, or our schools don't need work or whatever. Let me tell you, we have good schools. We have good teachers. We have great teachers. We have extraordinary administrators, all and support staff, all committed to really helping our kids to achieve. So don't let anyone tell you that our schools are not good, because they are. We're just, you know, diverse and unique, and that brings challenges. So, you know, I would like to work with my, with the Board of Ed to talk about that. To, you know, let's really look at test reform, because they are by nature culturally insensitive. So that's the first thing. I couldn't agree more with Lisa about funding coming from the state and from the federal government, because there are so many unfunded mandates that education really is just under the gun with. So yes, so much of the education budget, and that's just not, you know, here in Norwalk, but it's all throughout Connecticut, that you know, so much of the burden is put on the taxpayer. So yes, we need more funding from Hartford. We need more funding from Washington. Absolutely. I also think I want to also address, providing more preschool, after school activities. And then I'd just like to go back to the South Norwalk School, because that's been something on the table for so very long.
Thank you.
And we've got to get that South Norwalk School. And I want to say, go back to something I said in my opening statement, which is that we need to listen to all voices, right? And so I think initially when that school was discussed, not all the voices were listened to. And I think that we would have that school by now if that had been the case, if all stakeholders were at the table. So we've done that.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Really wish we had time for closing statements, but we do not. We're out of time at this point. We have a couple more sessions that we want to get to. Pastor Ewell, turn it over to you for transition. Thank you all.
We invite you to stay with us as we prepare to hear from the Board of Education. We invite you to stay as they share with us, and maybe that would be helpful to you as well in terms of your position as well. Again, we want to thank the Board of Education member for coming on to be with us tonight. We like to just ask you, we know that we're kind of limited, and we're just asking you, of course, to keep your answers limit to the 1 minute margin as well. We will try to answer series of questions as we can, and then we will try to be fair and expeditedly as we can. We ask you to please be prepared to unmute your mic so it won't take a moment for you to undo it when they call on you. Thanks again, and back into the hand of Dr. Kelly.
Thank you so much. So with the Board of Education, we'll just stick to the education questions. And we have about 2 or 3 of those for the sake of time. And so we'll get right to it. The first question regarding education is, can you describe your strategy for learning disabilities when it comes to mainstreaming and dealing with special education classes? Can you describe your strategy when it comes to learning disabilities, mainstreaming, and special education classes? Shirley, we'll start with you.
Shirley, will you check, make sure I'm talking?
Mosby.
Shirley Mosley.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. So I'm on mute now. I do apologize. Welcome. Again, you said strategy in regards to special education, right?
Special education class, yes.
Yes. Strategy, there's numerous different strategies that we could implement in regards to that. And years ago, well, currently as well, we have the special ed department that has the teachers, the resources, and all that put together to sit and examine each kids. Now, each children, they need to be individually examine and review to see what fits best for them and the needs that they have. And we have to make sure that going forward, that when we identify those needs, that we have the resources that can take care of those kids in those areas. There's so many different areas out there. There's in the ADHD, there's all different types of special learning disability that needs to be addressed. And I know that at one point we had kids that was outsourced, but we brought the kids back. But some of those children coming back, we have to really monitor and see if bringing them back or outsourcing them is the right thing for those kids. And if they are succeeding, and then we need to be more transparent and get not only involvement from just the special ed department and staff, but involvement from parents as well, because they are more closer to their children to see what's going on. And a lot of parents sometimes are not familiar with some of the different services that could benefit their kids. And we need to stay diligent on that. We need to be more transparent with that and get it out there. And we need to have parental involvement as well as listen to the specialists that are coming in to evaluate the child. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, sorry.
Colin?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much to the IMF for hosting this and to our community members for taking part. I'm going to jump right into it because this is a kind of exciting question for what the district is doing currently. As board chair, one of the things that I have come to learn and celebrate is that every single child learns differently. So when we try to carve out some kids and put them in special ed, what we're doing is not really acknowledging the different ways that the mainstream children learn. And so one of the things we did this year was we reorganized the curriculum department. The superintendent did, and the board supported that, so that we are designing instruction in what's called a universal way, universal design of instruction. What that means is we're not trying to teach mainstream kids one way and special ed kids another way. We're acknowledging that every single child learns differently. And that actually helps us to build a pedagogy that caters to every child's individual needs in a way that's actually more beneficial to both our special needs students and to our quote unquote mainstream students. I think it's a very exciting development. I think it's the direction that many districts are going, and I'm so glad that Norwalk is heading there as well.
Thank you, Alex. Alex, you're on mute.
How's that?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay, well, every special ed child has an IEP, which is an individual educational plan. And they follow this and they construct it so that it is exactly streamlined for that child. In those meetings that the parents have with counselors, the parents come, they design a plan that is the best way that gives the proper services that that child needs in order to learn. Now, also, all of the children, they need to be, a lot of the mainstream. I had worked 31 years at Rowan Elementary School, so I've worked with a lot of special ed students, and they were always mainstreamed. Some of them had their own classes, but they were also always mainstreamed out to music, out to phys ed, and out to art, so they could interact and get friends in the mainstreamed area, depending upon what their issue is. So there are so many different issues, and that's why they have these programs to and meetings that they streamline it for individually each child, and that's what they do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kara.
Yes, hi, good evening, and thank you for that question. So when it comes to special education in our schools, I think there are really three key aspects to it. The first is being able to identify which of our students are struggling and what exactly their issues are. So having a system in place where we can quickly and accurately determine what exactly is going on with a certain student. Secondly, I think that parental intervention or involvement with the process, as Alex just mentioned, the IEP process, I think is absolutely critical. Third, I think that ensuring that we have the proper funding in place to hire the right people for the positions that are required in order to support these students is critical. And I know that right now in the city, we do have a lot of open positions and a lot of them specifically are in this area. So I do worry about the students that are, potentially missing out on the services that I'm sure they so desperately need in a good regular year. But especially right now, given where we are with the COVID pandemic and the last year plus of disrupted learning models, I think it's even more critical that we are focusing on these students and making sure that they are being provided the services that they deserve.
Thank you, Karen. Catherine?
Could you restate the question just so I make sure I'm answering it as people have changed their responses?
The question is, what are your considerations or strategies for dealing with learning disabilities when it comes to special education?
First, I want to thank the IMF for inviting me to be part of this. As a special ed student myself, before special ed was a thing, and my three sons were all special ed students, started in the Norwalk schools. I experienced the process as a parent, and I happen to have English as my first language. I happen to have the privilege of being white, and I also happen to share the same disability with my children. And it was an overwhelming process as a parent. And then I continued on to advocate for other parents. What I learned is that there are programs that come in and then come out of the schools based on funding. And if we don't have the funding, then those programs get cut. And there's this ebb and flow of programs over the decades. So I would really want to focus on that. I, as a board member, supported the superintendent to get the funding from the state that we needed to fulfill whatever needs are coming from the special ed department, coming up, supporting the parents. All of the ideas that the people before me spoke about were great, but we have to fund them. And as a parent, it was frustrating to hear that Orton Gillingham had been in the school and was the way to teach a dyslexic child. I have two dyslexic children, and there was no longer that program because of the budget cuts. So I truly believe in our teachers and think they need the resources to do what they do best.
Thank you, Catherine. Sherry.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having this forum. The district has identified 5 strategies, and one of the strategies is equity. And equity is making sure that every child, no matter what their learning style or circumstance, has an opportunity to learn, succeed, and achieve. And if I'm elected, I do intend to collaborate with my colleagues across the district to make sure that our students and our administrators have the tools necessary to make sure that all of our kids can learn. At the same time, it is particularly interesting because we have to make sure that our special ed students who may have not gotten the supports that they needed during the pandemic, we need to make sure that there are wraparound supports provided to them, given the online learning that we've just come through. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Jody?
Hi, my name is Jody Sattler. This is a topic that I have been dealing with my entire life. I have a brother who's 45 years old with special needs, and my parents dealt with mainstreaming and services him my whole life. One of the things, and I have a child with a learning disability, one of the biggest issues that parents run into with Norwalk Public Schools is they have to do private assessments of their children. We do not do a very good job of providing the initial assessment that the kids need, and parents get frustrated and they go pay a lot of money to show the school that their child has a disability, a special need, a learning disability. And they sometimes can't even get to the point of talking to any of the specialists without bringing in these private assessments. We need to give parents the opportunity to get their children assessed within the school district more than having to go to outside specialists. If that can happen, we have a better plan in place. Then we can address the needs of the child much better than having the parents kind of fight uphill with getting these private assessments done. The issue with the mainstreaming, I've seen the ups and downs of it my whole life. Again, my 45-year-old brother's been mainstreamed and not mainstreamed. What I have seen personally in the schools is that we have really good interventionists that can push into the classrooms, and they help all the kids in the class. And that's because it allows the teacher to have smaller groups. It allows the groups to be put on the same skill level. And then you bring in people that can help each of those individual groups. Our class sizes are too big.
Thank you,
and
Jody.
when you...
Thank you. And Janine.
I'll try to keep it short so I don't get cut off. Thank you again for everyone, for the IMF, for having us here tonight and inviting us to speak. I agree with Karen and Catherine on some of the things that they said, particularly when we're talking about our teachers and budgeting. I think we really truly need to fight hard for the budget in this arena. We have seen it throughout the schools. As I can hear us speaking here, myself included, I have a child who has a learning disability. I think that includes a lot of us, more than we even think or that we know. So I do believe that, we really need to increase this budget and get things going in that direction. For certain items, such as we definitely need enough teachers, that we can qualified teachers that can help our students and bring them to the levels that we need to bring them to. We need that early identification, like Kara was saying earlier on. I believe that's a big part of it as well. I also think that when we're talking about IEPs and et cetera, that we really need to do a good part on the parent education piece. I feel that this is where the program falls apart a lot, where either the parent is coming into school and doesn't really realize that the child needs any special attention. But once they get into the program, they don't really know how to advocate for themselves. It seems to be, you know, like so many things we do, there's a bunch of initials thrown at it. And, you know, parents try to just kind of, sometimes I feel like act like they know what's going on, just so they don't get pulled out. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.
A quick reminder, you only have 1 minute, so you have to keep your answer quick and to the point.
All right.
Trying, Reverend.
We're educators. That's kind of hard to do. All right. Let's get to one other question, and then maybe we'll have some time for you all to elaborate just a little bit more with your closing remarks. And this question involves the achievement gap, especially for communities of color. What would be your strategy to assure that communities of color get an equitable education? Equitable education for communities of color. We'll start with Janine. Since you were last, we'll put you first this time.
Could you repeat the whole question, how you phrased it, please?
Sure. Considering the large achievement gap, what strategies will you propose to assure communities of color obtain equitable education?
Okay. Well, I think as far as equitable education, first of all, we need to get everyone on the same page. This is what we're talking about. We're trying to, as far as an equitable education, it is not trying to decrease any education for anyone else. Equity is about fair, to be unbiased and undiscriminatory when we're making these decisions. I think a large part of it is the teachers that we need and that we're talking about recruiting. Recruitment is huge. I think we need to recruit more people of color. We hear time and time again from students, inspirational stories where you had a student that wasn't doing well and they didn't really know why they weren't doing well until they had that special teacher. And it was a teacher who either looked like them, came from an area that they came from, et cetera. And I think we need more of that. And that needs to be a huge part of our recruitment process. We definitely need to have a teacher community that reflects our own community.
Thank you. Jody.
Hi. I'm going to kind of go back to where I was finishing on my last question, which is back again to the smaller class sizes. I believe one of the biggest issues is that teachers do not get to know their students as well, and you have too much of a difference in skill level within a class. This is especially true in the middle school area, and that's where you definitely get to see a bigger achievement gap hit the students. We have kids in a classroom with a 2nd grade reading level and an 11th grade reading level. How can we ask a teacher to teach to those extremes? If we had smaller class sizes and the teachers had a chance to get to know their students better, the students would be more confident in school. They would feel that they could achieve more. And I think that would really make a huge difference in closing this achievement gap. I also think we need the school in South Norwalk. I'm just going to quickly throw that in there because then the entire community can be invested in a student's success.
Thank you so much. Sherry.
As I mentioned earlier, one of the priorities that the district has identified has to do with equity and making sure that all of our students get the supports that they need. I would recommend that we put in place a program that perhaps would identify children earlier when they are in need of additional support. In addition, one of the goals that I have if I am elected, and that is to pursue teacher recruitment and retention of teachers of color. Studies do show that students perform better when they have a more diverse teaching staff, and the white children perform better and the children of color perform better as well. So I think that if we were to be more deliberate with that and focus on that and get more teachers of color and have a more diverse teaching staff, that it will go well in helping us to close that gap.
Thank you, Sherry. Catherine?
Hi, I think this is a very important question. I've lived in South Norwalk for 27 years, and I think that the importance is talking to the actual people that are in the community and seeing what they would like for their children and what their needs are. And the community has changed from 27 years ago when I first moved here to now, to talk to the parents currently in the district and to see what they envision for the community school, what they would like for their children, what kind of an environment they would like, the makeup of the teachers. And with that community involvement, move ahead with the school. But also crucial is that there's funding for this. This school needs to be absolutely what these kids need to move forward, and parent choice, that if you chose that you wanted your child to go to a different school, you could do that, or you could do a community school. But we have to make sure that we have the funding to make sure that this school is what these kids need and what will cause them, allow them to, whatever their career choices are, college, military, trade school. And my real concern is the financial piece. And I remember my father talking about wanting this school 25 years ago. So there's a reason it hasn't been built yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Colin?
Thank you, Dr. Kelly, for bringing up this question. I think it's extremely important. When the board approved our new strategic plan and made equity the focal point of it, people had a lot of questions of like, what does that mean? What does equity mean, right? And what it means is addressing this achievement gap. We know we have some of the best students in Norwalk. We can go toe-to-toe with anybody in the country. We also have a lot of students who need extra help. When we talk about equity, we talk about making sure that we have equal access to things like reading and math specialists. We looked around at our schools and found that some schools had multiple reading specialists and some schools had none. We took that out of the school budgets and made that a central office function so that we're making sure that every school had equal access to those reading and math specialists. We're talking about, funding. When we talk about all of these things cost money, of course they do, but we want to make sure that when we're thinking about our budgeting, we're making sure that we're getting the funding that we need to address those students who have those greatest needs. That's not just on the operating side, but of course with our school facilities. Not just this neighborhood school in South Norwalk that we are making this our #1 priority, but we're talking about creating learning spaces in every school that is going to engender the best learning experience for our kids. And I just want to, really reiterate what some of my colleagues, Janine and Sherry, have already brought up, which is that we know there's hard data to show that when kids have access to teachers that look like them, they do better. And that we're going to make diversity, recruitment, and retention, again, a huge priority. It's already starting.
Thank you. Shirley.
Hi. Okay, the achievement gap, especially for African-American children, we need to start focusing and staying on transparency. That's the first thing. And with transparency, we need to make sure we get the parents and the community involved, and so that we can have the old statement, take a village, we need to make sure that we stay on point with that. And we need data, accurate data or data that's more transparent, so we know exactly. And I hear about the Sono school and that we need to bring that in, but we need to take into account that not only should we look at the Sono school, but we should look at still pursuing additional schools, because if we get the school with the children that's there, we are going to need more schools to put the children in. But for the academic achievement, we've had children in the school system that fell through the crack. It's just that we haven't received the data on that or the transparency on that to let us know which one. And for example, the Briggs children, I still want to find out what happened to them. They were taken from Briggs, and now I just need to know where they are now.
Thank you, Shirley. Kara.
Yes, thank you for the question. So I have to say that I am I'm very pleased that the Norwalk Public Schools, as well as the Board of Education, have decided to make equity a cornerstone of its strategy this year. And I attended the first Equity and Literacy Program event last week at Marvin Elementary, where Dr. Fergus presented some really interesting information specific to our schools here and how our students are performing. And one of the things that really kind of struck me, he showed a slide that showed students who were, in a special education kind of category, as well as mainstream, as well as our talented and gifted. And then he matched that up with race. And the disparity between the students that were falling into the special education group, mainstream, and talented and gifted was pretty stark. And when we dug into that a little bit, one of the things that I learned was that the testing that is done for our talented and gifted students is done all in English. And we here in Norwalk have students speaking over 59 languages. And so I think that puts that group at a great disadvantage. And that is a group that is not often talked about or focused on when we talk about special education. The other area is hiring of minority teachers. I do believe that it's critical that students see people who look like them. I think that professional training around things such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as implicit bias, which is something I myself have done a lot of training around through my work in gun violence prevention. So I think those are key pieces of it.
Thank you, Kara. And Alex.
Hi. First of all, let me touch on about recruitment a little bit. I've been on multiple teacher interviews, and as a teacher, there has been very few teachers of color trying to come in and interview. So I definitely think that there needs to be a recruitment and an incentive to get more teachers of color into our school system. I just think that they either don't know about us or they're not coming because and we need to give them some kind of incentive, because I agree that I think that would be a good point. Next, quickly, I talk a little bit about pre-K. I think there needs to be some kind of a pre-K for children, because it's not, speaking not equitable, I see kids who come into kindergarten and some of them can read all their letters and know yellow from blue, and then others, it's come in and they don't know one color from another. So they already start off behind the 8 ball. So we need some kind of equity there. Because when they continue, they're already behind the 8 ball, they have anxiety, they get frustrated because they're just pushed, and developmentally, they're not ready to move on. The next step, I do feel there needs to be more parental support. And we need to find areas of how to support the parents so that they come to more of the conferences. I know a lot of the African Americans didn't come into the conferences. So, and I just to end that, I really feel that the students love it when their teachers are involved. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. We're going to close, and I want to give you an opportunity for a quick closing remark. And the question that I would like for you to focus on is this: why should we elect you or re-elect you to the Board of Education? Kara, we'll start with you. 1 minute, please.
Sure, yes, thank you. So I think that all of us candidates here have a lot in common, and we obviously care deeply about the students in Norwalk and have a lot of the same ideas. But I think that where I am different from my candidates is that I have deep experience in the gun violence prevention movement, and I would like to be able to take my experience as a leader of the Connecticut chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America for 7 years, and my experience around safe campuses and security when it comes to how to keep students and faculty safe. This is something that I've been made aware of is not currently a committee on the Board of Education. And so one of the things that I would like to do, if elected to the Board of Education, is to form a safety committee, a committee that would allow Board of Ed members to participate along with our SROs in the Norwalk Police Department in developing a district-wide policy to ensure that our school campuses and our students are as safe as possible.
Thank you, Karen. Alex?
How's that, good? Issues like South Norwalk School, more funding, building trust with parents, and equity for all students are all topics that we can hardly touch on today in this short forum. We are here tonight because all of us care about Norwalk's children's education and their health. Politics should not be part of the decision process when you go into that voting booth. Parents should be making the decision based on what's best for the children, not on party platform. Time does not allow us to go into depth on all of these issues. So I'm going to ask you to go to the Hours has a special overview of the board's candidates. All of us have written summations on questions and base your decision on the platform that all of us Board of Education submitted there. I've been a teacher for over 31 years in the Norwalk school system, and I'm born and raised in Norwalk. And I really feel I know the ins and outs, and I hope that you will consider voting for me because I think I can really service your children for the needs that they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Catherine?
I'm really proud of the Norwalk schools. I'm really proud of my 3 boys that went K-12 and graduated and went out into the world. And they may have drifted into other communities that weren't as diverse and thought, wow, there's some things here that we didn't have growing up. And then they learned the difference of growing up in a diverse environment and not. And I'm really proud of the people that they are going out into the world. And I want to run to and be a part of the Board of Ed. I am 1 of 9. The Board of Ed is only the Board of Ed, and I am just a piece of that pie. I want to be a part of that to help that the children currently in the school have the education that my children had coming through this. And I think that's supporting the superintendent, having a superintendent that stays long enough to gain power and leadership in the state and can go up to Hartford and is recognized as the Norwalk superintendent, here to stay, totally supported by their board. And also improve communications. I was part of beginning to get rid of paper flyers and emails, which allowed different parents, rather than the ones that were picking their kids up at school, those with emails to get communications. And finally, I would like to make sure bring my social work skills to the board and my listening more than talking and trying to find commonalities rather than a diversive, one side against another. I'd like to try to. Thank you.
Thank you. Janine.
Thank you again, IMF, Dr. Kelly, Reverend Newell, for having us here this evening. I am presently working full-time like most of us or many of us here. And I'm also the PTA president of Nathan Hale, and I'm running a campaign that has taken more time than I could ever have imagined. And somehow I'm trying to do this and to gain more responsibility. I'm trying to get this position and take on more responsibility because as a PTA mom, I've seen and worked firsthand in our schools. And I'm always surprised on how much is needed above and beyond what the schools and the students are set up for success. I'm taking on more responsibility because at the middle school level, where my 11-year-old is right now, I see parent and student participation drop off exponentially. And I believe we need added support at the higher grades when children are trying to mature but are still so confused by everything going on around them, especially in these last years of pandemic and quarantine. I'm taking on more responsibility and trying to get this position to show my girls and other girls and women of color that we participate, we get involved, we don't sit back and listen to others make decisions for us. I want my girls who are Jewish, Asian, women of color to grow up to be strong women and activists like many before us, and hopefully like me.
Thank you, Janine.
Thank you.
Jody?
Hi, Jody Sattler. Our students just went through a very difficult time, and we need to get them back on track. That happens by providing a safe space where all students feel confident in their learning and their academic goals. We need to focus on our decline in our reading and math proficiencies that occurred through COVID by creating smaller class sizes so teachers can build a strong relationship with students and understand their specific needs. Running as an independent is crucial to my goal as a next step leader. I'm done with partisan politics adversely affecting the lives and future of our students. Norwalk can and should do better. I have the experience, leadership, and passion to get the ball rolling towards the next generation of our Board of Education. I've already proven to be an effective leader in my community and for Norwalk schools, and I'm ready and excited to take the next step. I have been on every PTA, school governance council, and co-chair of every school governance council that my students have attended. I ran a before school program at Rowayton Elementary School for 8 years, and I have 3 children at Brian McMahon High School right now, so I know the daily issues that the students are facing. They want to be in school more, they want to be successful in school, and that comes through a dedicated Board of Ed that asks very strategic questions. And
thank you. Colin?
Yes, and thanks again to the IMF for hosting us tonight. I want to say that, being on the board this past 2 years has been one of the most humbling honors of my life, but also one of the most rewarding experiences. As everybody has noted, this has been a very challenging time for our public schools. And the thing that keeps me going, that keeps me inspired are our students, our kids. People always love to ask me, why do you want to do this? You don't have any kids. And I have to remind them, I actually have about 12,000 children in our schools. I'm a teacher myself. My parents were public school teachers for decades. I'm running because of these students. I'm running for a new term. They've been through a lot, and we have a lot more work to do to get them back where they need to be. My job on the board is to make sure that every child's learning needs are met, whether that's academically, socially, or emotionally. We know that students cannot learn if they do not feel safe or supported. And I agree, while I respect this electoral process, I do not want to play politics with our kids. I can tell you that we've been building fantastic momentum in our Norwalk Public Schools, and we have a lot more to go. It's just been my great honor and privilege to serve on the board.
Thank you. Thank you. Shirley?
Thank you again, IMF. Norwalk is an amazing city, and I was born and raised here in Norwalk. I am a product of this city's outstanding public schools, and I'm a graduate of Brian McMahon High School. And my daughter attended school here as well. I believe in the values, the community ideals, and concerns that all help make Norwalk a successful model of an urban-suburban community with innovative goals that create a vibrant, academically progressive, and diverse school district. You might say my passion for public service is family business. My father had the great privilege to serve in a multitude of elected and appointed positions here in the city. In addition, I am a current sitting member of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. I also served as an employee for Norwalk Public Schools, where I worked directly with the superintendent. If I'm elected to the Board of Education, I will work diligently, utilizing the sum of my experiences to help inform judgment while making thoughtful contributions as a steward of this distinguished, magnanimous body, the Norwalk Board of Education. It would be my honor to count on your generous support. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. And Sherry.
Hi. I would like to thank the IMF, Reverend Clark, Dr. Kelly, Reverend Ewell, and the community for tonight. As a former board member who served on the board for 6 years, I have not lost my interest or passion to serve the Norwalk community and its children. It is my intention then as it is now to be sure all students would benefit from a good quality education. As an advocate for open communication, transparency, and accountability, I have always encouraged parents to take an active role in their children's education. I believe my years of experience, knowledge, and successful historical information will be beneficial with working with the board, superintendent, and stakeholders to win back the trust of the public. I believe we need input from everyone in order to achieve our goal of ensuring all children receive a quality education and are successful. I'm running on the independent party line whose platform reinforced my belief and passion in advocating for inclusiveness for all stakeholders. I have advocated strongly for our children. I have the community, I have strongly supported the community and kept them informed. I believe with that, and I would like to bring that to the community again, of making sure that input is definitely trusted. I'm asking you to support and vote for me on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank all of you so very much. We really appreciate your time tonight. I'm going to turn it back into the hands of Pastor Roosevelt Ewell.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. And I again like to thank all our candidates for certainly being willing and open to participate with us on tonight. But please allow me and allow yourself to hear from our president as he gives closing remark and close us out on tonight, Dr. Richard Wesley Clark. Thank you, Dr. Clark.
Right, my brothers and sisters, some of the Zoom, I certainly want to express my thanks and appreciation to the Reverend Roosevelt Ewell, who we asked to lead this and political forum. We also want to thank the pastor, I believe, of Kelly Temple's Church of God in Christ in New York, who is a member of the IMF, and I do call him the Bishop of New York. Thank you, Dr. Kelly, Dr. Jacob Kelly, for ably handling this forum and engaging our candidates constructively. To the participants, God bless you. We hope that your aspiration will be met and that the citizens will vote rightly as per their conscience. They have heard you, and so you are all in our prayers. Thank you, participants, attendees, for listening, and we pray for the best. Thank you, and I will see you very soon.
Good night, everyone.
Good night and good
night. Thank you very much for having us.
We pray and wish you well. All right. Good night.
You as well.